Heyo everyone! Hexi here. And today, I'm gonna be talking about an odd little game that came out in 2007 exclusively on the Xbox 360. That's right, we're gonna be talking about Lost Odyssey today. A lot of people say that this game is either the missing Final Fantasy or the true Final Fantasy 13, and that's because it was created by one of the original creators of the Final Fantasy series. The game was created by Sakaguchi and developed by his own Mistwalker studio, as well as Feel Plus, and published directly by Microsoft Game Studios. The game was made in the Unreal 3 engine by a crack team of developers. So while they weren't exactly familiar with the systems of the engine, they were able to make it look very pretty. Yeah, the whole reason that I'm talking about this game today is because I remembered it in a sort of fever dream. And I just remembered playing the demo for it back in the day at a GameStop, and all I could remember were the ridiculously tall helmets. And speaking of ridiculous, look at the ridiculousness of these tanks. We've got the big sideways spinning club tanks, and then we've got the tanks with vertically swinging chopping clubs. And speaking of ridiculous, look at this triple sword dodge. This is so over the top. I think we know who the main character is in this game. After a meteor falls on the two warring armies, Kaim is left alive and walks off the battlefield casually. Turns out that he's immortal, and he meets a few other immortals along the way. Now, the thing about immortals is that they can't die, so if they get knocked out during a battle, they will revive themselves after 3 turns. There's also this thing called the soul linking system. It allows you to link one of your immortal characters to one of your mortal characters, and they'll be able to learn skills that the mortals learn via weird parasitic osmosis. There's this one scene where Kaim stabs one of the Kent soldiers in his ridiculously tall helmet. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me why he died, because obviously it wouldn't hit his head. Until we see some scorched Kent soldiers later and realize they're weird dogman creatures with some really cool cybernetic spines, like mine. One of the first systems you're introduced to in the game is the combat ring system. You have to hold down the right trigger button in order to time letting go whenever the big ring gets inside the small ring. And you get graded on how well you do at lining them up. There are over 200 rings for your characters to find, equip, and upgrade throughout the game. You can fuse different damage types and elements together, as well as create a whole host of rings to take on different challenges. It's sort of like the rings are a character in and of themselves, with how you have to manage them to fight the various enemies throughout the game. The semi-active combat system reminds me a lot of Xenogears, and there are some boss fights that have a sort of puzzle-like element to them, where you have to defeat certain bits in a proper order, or else you won't be able to damage them, or they'll do extra damage to you. Now, whenever I was getting this game set up on the emulator, I had some weird lighting artifacts whenever there was, fire on screen. It caused the shadows to bug out, and I found out that that's because you need to set Zinnia to ROV mode whenever you're playing this particular game. And the game does have this Magitech setting going on, like the Final Fantasy games. Like, sure, we're doing the whole sword and sorcery thing, but there's also airships and trains, so it makes sense that these things are here, considering Sakaguchi worked on this, and it calls back to a lot of similar themes as Final Fantasy. Throughout the game, you're going to be able to play as various other characters aside from Kain. Sometimes the story will shift focus to one of the mortals, or maybe one of the other immortals. But either way, it's nice that the game doesn't focus solely on one character the whole way through. And unlike other JRPGs, in this game you can have a maximum of 5 characters in your party. I really like how the cutscenes have these comic book panel style transitions that cut in to show enhanced expressions on people's faces or important set pieces. It's a lot better than Bayonetta 1's attempt, which had still pictures. It feels like a lot of the unimportant characters' dialogue is improvised, because they'll sort of like mumble through lines and they're not really saying anything. Now, that could just be bad voice acting, but I have a feeling that it's just a lack of direction.
You see anything?
See. Down there. Or maybe under the... Yeah.
Here, let me help.
Hold this. I'm gonna die.
Now, the game does cover a lot of heavy themes. There's a bunch of fantasy politics, as well as a top secret weapon called Grand Staff that may or may not be responsible for the events of the opening. There's this whole mystery around the immortals and why they can't remember anything. So, the game has a pretty dense storyline and a mystery to uncover. The game focuses a lot on how the immortals have to deal with living forever. It's kind of a heavy subject matter, but it's really cool the way that they, play on the emotional effects of what it does to the characters. Now, I haven't seen a bunch of reviews for this game out there. I've seen plenty of retrospectives, though. Hell, one of them's even 2 hours long. So obviously, people remember this game fondly. However, due to the complex storyline and the difficult nature of the gameplay mechanics, I feel like it's really hard to pin down the nature of this game. But it seemed very important to video game history, so I wanted to talk about it because it doesn't get nearly as much recognition as it deserves. That's all I've got time for this week, guys. Ciao for now, and Hexi out. Thanks go out to my Patreon supporters. Your donations mean the world to me, and I thank you for supporting my future endeavors.